right, welcome back to another podcast. And today I have Edward Jesson with me. Edward is an attorney at Jesson and Rains law firm. So Edward, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, if you could just give a little bit of a description of your law firm, just to get us going with the podcast.
So yeah, Jesson Rains, we're a law firm here in Charlotte, North Carolina. My wife and I opened the law firm back in 2015. Right now, we've got 4 attorneys working for us, paralegals, staff as well. We're licensed in North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, New Mexico, New Jersey, I think. We recently hired an attorney who's got some strange licenses there for family reasons. But we concentrate on business, construction, and estate planning law. So my side of the firm, my side of the practice is mainly related to construction industry issues. I do some general civil litigation as well for general business disputes. And then my wife and the other attorneys, their main focus is on estate planning. So wills, trusts, that sort of stuff, planning for the future. And then we all do some level of business transactional work as well. So drafting contracts, review of contracts, obviously mine are mainly in the construction space, some small sort of mergers and acquisitions and that sort of thing too.
Okay. So you've started this, as you mentioned, I think it was, what was the year? Sorry.
2015. Yeah. November 1st, 2015.
So like 9 years now, almost 10 years. But coming to where you are now, how did it all kind of evolve? Where did you start from? But if you could like start way back. So if I understand correctly, you're from England.
That's right. Yeah. So I grew up in England, went to high school in England. I moved to the US in 2005 for college. Went to the University of South Carolina for undergrad. In the UK, you have to essentially pick your college major when you're a junior in high school. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. But my best friend growing up was from the US and moved back to the US for college and said, "Oh, it's great. It's a 4-year degree as opposed to a 3-year degree. And you can really take your first 3 years doing whatever before you have to pick a major." So I thought that sounded great. I had no ties to South Carolina. It was a bit of a culture shock moving there from just outside of London to Columbia, South Carolina, but I had a great time. I really enjoyed it there.
And maybe before you get into that part of it, like if you could describe England a little bit more for people who, most people know where England is, but like what was life like for you in England?
Not too dissimilar to here in the Carolinas, actually. So I grew up in a town called Baldock, Baldock. Very small town, less than 10,000 people. But commuting distance to London. So my dad worked in London growing up. He took the train down every day. It's probably about a 45 minutes to an hour long train ride down there. Mm-hmm. Fairly rural part of the country where we were outside of London. England's just so much smaller than the US geographically speaking, you can fit, I think geographically England would fit inside the state of North Carolina. Just to give you an idea on how small it is. So that was probably one of the biggest culture shocks I had when I came to the US is how big and diverse the US is. I've driven across the country a couple of times now, going to Montana and North Dakota, and just the different things you see as you're driving across the country here is kind of wild.
Mm-hmm. So back in high school, did you have like a close knit of friends? Like, who were you like, or what were you like in high school?
Yeah, so in high school, I went to a boarding school up until the time I was about 16. It was a school called Oundle. So very good school. And then at 16, you take one set of exams in the UK. They were called the GCSEs. I'm not sure what they're called now. And then for your last 2 years in high school, you're taking your A-levels. So I switched high schools and moved closer to home for my last 2 years of high school to do my A-levels. And it was a fairly small school I was at. So yeah, quite a close-knit group of friends there. Still close with some of the friends that I made in I guess middle school and on through boarding school now. My friend Richard, who was the American who moved back here, he lives in New Orleans now. He's a chef down there, and still see him and still see friends from St. Chris, which was the second school as well. So yeah, it was a fairly normal, not too dissimilar to growing up over here, I don't think.
Did you play any sports in school?
I did, actually. I played rugby for most of my life. I probably started playing rugby when I was about 5 or 6 years old and played that up until I was about 16. And then I actually started to play American football in the UK as well. It was starting to get popular, and NFL Europe was still a thing back then. So there was a lot of push to try and get some European players onto those sorts of practice squads and stuff like that. So did that for a couple of years before moving over here.
Okay. And when you did move over here, you mentioned you went to University of South Carolina, but you went for sports and entertainment management, right?
That's right. Yeah. I thought it sounded fun. It was. It wasn't probably the most academically grueling course that the University of South Carolina had to offer. So left a lot of time to enjoy my 4.5 years, I guess, down there in undergrad. Yeah, not too much to do in Columbia, South Carolina, unless there's a university sporting event or something going on. So, but it was a fun time. I did enjoy the major. Part of the requirements of that program was that you had to carry out 2 internships, which was I think a very good idea that more programs should probably impose. And a lot of my peers from college who are in that same program did end up going on and working in the sports and entertainment industry. Obviously, I didn't. I chose to go to law school at some point. That was partially because of one of my internships. Through that program, I worked for Speedway Motorsports Incorporated, who that's the company that owns the track up in Concord, and they own several other tracks around the country that are NASCAR sanctioned. And while I was there, I actually did a lot of work with their attorney who was employed there, their general counsel, a guy called Chris Corey, and really enjoyed that side of the internship, and thought, well, my dad's a lawyer as well, and thought, maybe law school is something I want to pursue.
Yeah. So before going to college, the university, did you get any kind of counsel from your parents or from friends, like as far as what you should do, what you should pursue? Not really.
I think. So me deciding to move to the US for college was sort of, we didn't really know that many people who had done it, apart from my friend Richard, who was, he grew up in the US. So that was obviously, he had a US passport. That was easy for him. So for me, it was just a learning experience, the whole thing, having to deal with the immigration side of things, to be able to actually, legally be in the US to attend college. College majors and all that sort of stuff was very foreign to me. So I didn't really know what I was doing. I think my first major I picked was business, and I had to take college one of the introductory calculus classes, and that was not for me. I was probably not going to pass that class too well, so I switched to a major that didn't have calculus involved, and a couple of my friends who were in the freshman dorms with me as well, they were sports and entertainment management majors, and they told me how great it was and how interesting it was. So I was like, yeah, it sounds good to me. That's what I'll do.
Okay, so it's almost like on a whim, kind of a.
Very much so, yes.
Yeah, and how did you go about switching, or not switching? You completed the sports and entertainment degree, but then you went to law school. Like, what were some decision-making process that you went about, like coming up with, going into law?
Yeah, so like I said, when I did that internship with Speedway Motorsports, that kind of gave me some of the impetus to to go to law school. I thought, well, this is quite interesting work. I would like to do some of this. So that's kind of what put me down the path of it. I had a very good friend in undergrad as well. We were roommates senior year of college and friends all through. And he actually, he did a master's in tax accounting down at the University of Miami. And that's kind of one of the things that played into it as well, is that I was accepted to the University of Miami for law school, which is where I ultimately went. And my friend Danny was accepted down there for the tax accounting program as well. So we were like, okay, well, we'll go down there and room together. And his was only a year program, mine was 3 years, but that was part of the decision-making process as well.
So having friends that make similar decisions, at least in terms of which college to go to, helps.
Yeah, that definitely helped out. I probably would have gone to the University of Miami regardless when it came to law school, just based on everywhere I'd applied and where I'd been accepted to. That was sort of the probably the highest ranked academically, and just felt like the best fit. Miami's there's an attraction in going to Miami as well,
Yeah. So from there, when you graduated the law school, what was your career path like from that point until you started your own firm?
So yeah, when I graduated law school, I was working for a federal judge at the time on the district court for the Southern District of Florida. So I was working with her. Now, because of my immigration status back then, in terms of I was just a student, I didn't have employment authorization. I couldn't actually be employed, and I couldn't be employed by the court for a couple of reasons. There are some federal funding bills and stuff like that come into play. But so I was kind of interning for that judge. I worked for her for about a year. And so after that, I got a job with a law firm called Brown and Heller, who we were heavily involved in some of the civil litigation that came out of the Bernie Madoff situation, that Ponzi scheme. And that firm actually shut down overnight, quite unexpectedly. We were all working from home on a Friday afternoon and kind of got the call that, hey, we're shutting down, come in on Monday and get your stuff. So that left me unemployed for a little bit. That left me unemployed as I was getting married to Kelly, which I think was a bit of a blessing, because it gave me plenty of time to help with some of the wedding planning. Ultimately ended up getting a job after that with a firm called Fowler White Burnett, who are in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach. I was in their Fort Lauderdale office, and that's really where I started doing a lot of the construction work. I worked for a partner there who handled a lot of construction disputes, mainly from the insurance side of things. But that really got me involved in the construction related practice of law.
Okay. And you mentioned when you got unemployed, you were getting ready to get married. What was that time phase in your life like? Like, were you stressed? Like, how did you handle different kind of emotions?
I kind of referred to it as fun employment at the time. I was stressed in terms of, I just finished 3 years in law school and wanted to get out there and get working and get a start in life and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, I knew I would find a job eventually. I wasn't too concerned about that. It was just in terms of finding a job that was a good fit, I suppose. And that took some time. It was when I graduated from undergraduate in 2009, obviously the economy was kind of in the tank back then. So you had a lot of people at that time graduate from undergraduate degrees and go on and do professional degrees, whether it be law school or your master's or whatever. Basically stay in school a few years later, hoping that the job market gets a little bit better on the back end. So when I graduated law school in 2012, there was, I think our graduating class from Miami at the time was probably one of the biggest graduating classes they'd ever had. So, the legal market down there in South Florida was pretty saturated as well. So I knew I'd find something. I knew it would take a while. I, like I said, I was getting married at the time, so it wasn't really. I was applying for jobs and helping plan the wedding, and I had time on my hands, so it made that area that time of life a little bit easier, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. What was your wife's kind of thoughts on you being unemployed when you were just about to get married?
She probably wasn't too happy about it. At the time, she was working for a state appellate judge in Florida. So one of the things you can do when you graduate from law school, and it's very competitive, but you can do it's called a clerkship, a judicial clerkship, mm-hmm. where you go and work for a judge for a year or 2 years, whatever their term is. And so she had a judicial clerkship on I think the 4th District Court of Appeal in Florida. So she was working, but it's a government job, so it's not 60 hours a week. Mm-hmm. But she was working, and I think she was confident too that I would find a job. It was a matter of when, not if, and just had to keep applying and keep looking at them. It can be somewhat disheartening applying for jobs and getting rejection letters back. It's always going to be disheartening, I suppose, but just got to keep at it. There were plenty of law firms down in South Florida that were hiring, so it was just finding the right one.
Yeah. And when you were getting married, as far as advice for people who are about to get married, related to more on the financial side, what would you, and maybe advice is the wrong question there, maybe like from experience or from what works in your view or what doesn't work, like my understanding is traditionally two people get married, you put your finances together and you are acting as a one unit once you get married. What's your view on that whole thing as far as pooling finances together? Because today it seems like, there's a variety of different people. There's some people are like, okay, this is mine, this is yours. Even though they're married, they're kind of like treating it like separate. Like, what's your view on that, and what would you recommend?
Yeah, when Kelly and I first got married, we did keep all of our finances separate. More out of convenience than anything else, I think. Mm-hmm. It was just easier to do that. We had our bank accounts, we had our phone lines, we had all that sort of stuff. It was actually in 2015 when we moved to North Carolina and opened the law firm. That's when we put all of our finances together. And I have to say it's much easier having it that way. We pay the mortgage out the same account. It's not one of us has to pay it and then transfer money around and all that sort of stuff. Just all the money goes into the same account. All the money comes out of the same account. Being that we work together and we own the business together 50-50, the money's coming from the same place. It makes it a lot easier for us in our situation, especially mm-hmm. being business owners and working to, both owning that business together and being married. It makes that a lot easier. I don't think it's necessary. I think people should, people do what works for them, right?
But I wonder if there's like some kind of psychological thing behind it. Like if you keep things separate, does it then, subconsciously drive some kind of a wedge? Like,
I can definitely see that, especially if people are making different amounts of money. Mm-hmm. And then you come to, well, should we be splitting these bills 50-50 or should we be splitting these bills proportionately with what we're making, or should we come up with some other system to make this work? Again, for Kelly and I, having it all, what's mine is yours, right? Having it all in one pool makes sense. It's not something that we ever really butt heads about or anything like that. So I could see it conversely if we did have separate accounts. I could see that. I can definitely see how that could cause a rift at some point.
Yeah. And when it comes to working with your wife, you both own the law firm together. What is it like working with your wives? Like some people have great experiences working with their spouse and others not so good. Like what works, what doesn't work?
Yeah, no. Starting off with, I would say we didn't have a great experience when we first started out. We butted heads over a lot of things and that sort of thing. I think one of the biggest saving graces there for us has been that our practice areas split off at some point. When we first opened the law firm, we kind of took anything that came in the door. When we opened on November 1st, 2015, we didn't know anyone in Charlotte. We didn't have any clients. We knew a few people in Charlotte, but we didn't have any clients or anything like that. So, we took a little bit of everything that came in at that point. But as we really started to get a client base and start to focus on our separate areas of practice, that definitely alleviated a bit of the tension there, because Kelly was handling her clients, I was handling my clients, and there wasn't too much overlap there. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we still have to run the business together. I will be the first to admit that Kelly is a much better business person than I am. So she is definitely in charge of a lot of those business decisions. And I have input on them, obviously. And I mean, if there was something that I felt very strongly about, we probably wouldn't do it. But Kelly generally tends to have pretty good ideas when it comes to running the business, so far at least, touching wood. So yeah, I've found that it can be difficult in terms of if you don't work with your spouse, when you get out of work, you can stop thinking about and talking about work because you have different day-to-day lives. But it's work is always prevalent between us, because it's what we do. It's how we make our money. It's how we make a living.
So how do you? I guess first question would be like, do you even keep kind of like personal life and work life separate in some ways? Do you separate, like, okay, you came home, okay, we're not talking about work anymore, or like how integrated is your life between work and home?
It's pretty integrated at this point. It would be nice to we've played around sometimes with, okay, let's try and separate work and life, let's put a hard line between them or whatever. But it's just not really possible when it's just not possible when you live together and work together. There are always things that need to be discussed with work. Obviously, you spend a lot of time working, so it's difficult to separate them. It would be nice in an ideal world, I think, but we make it work. We discuss it, and sometimes we'll say, like, I don't want to talk about work right now. We don't need to be talking about this right now, but it comes up. It comes up a lot.
Yeah. So when you decided to start the firm, you and your wife, like what was that like? What were some discussions that you had? Like, okay, do we really want to do this? How is it going to work out? Like, what were some thoughts before starting the firm? Yeah,
it was a risk. So law school doesn't prepare you to be a business owner. Law school doesn't really prepare you to be a lawyer either. You get a lot of academic knowledge, but you don't get actually much knowledge about the practice of law. Mm-hmm. So it was definitely a risk, but the way we saw it is, we didn't have a house to be foreclosed on. We weren't in, huge amounts of debt on a bunch of different stuff. We had saved up money. So we thought, well, let's try starting this thing up. Let's see what happens. And worst case scenario, we fall flat on our face and we have to go and get jobs somewhere. We have to go and get traditional lawyer jobs. We toyed with the idea of just one of us starting the firm and one of us getting a job. So we had at least one, steady source of income when we were starting out. But ultimately decided against it. Just decided that it would be easier. There would be a lot of work to do in terms of setting everything up, and it would be easier with two people. So we kind of went that way. And I don't regret doing it that way. I think ultimately that was the right thing for us to do. We, touch wood. We've been around for 9 years, and I'm hoping we're definitely going to make it to the 10th anniversary next year.
Yeah. What was the reasoning for starting businesses? Like many people start businesses for various reasons. From being laid off, some people, I did like a little poll on one of the Facebook groups, and you get a lot of answers where people say, well, I got laid off, or nobody gave me a chance, so I had nothing else that I could do, so I started my own company, which seems to me like that's probably like the worst case scenario of why to
being
start
forced
a business.
into it's not great.
Right, but what was the reason why you started your business?
We had interviewed with a few places up here in Charlotte, and we'd had a couple of leads and stuff like that, but nothing concrete yet, and kind of wanted the ability to practice law our own way without being told what to do by someone senior to you, and also really liked the idea of the freedom that it would hopefully give us. We're still waiting for that freedom to arrive. We work more now than we ever did as employees at law firms, but at some it still does give you, even working as much as we do, it still does give you a certain level of freedom in terms of hiring decisions, firing decisions, vacation policy decisions, what days off are you going to take for public holidays a year, that sort of stuff. We do have a lot of freedom, and we get to run it the way we want to run it, which is nice.
Yeah, and I think the number one reason why people start companies is for freedom, even though sometimes people will start a company assuming that, okay, I'm going to start it and then somebody else will do everything for me and I won't do much, which is rarely ever the case. But you're right, like you do have the freedom. You can work 60, 80 hours a week, but you still have the freedom of when you're doing what you're doing. And like you mentioned, if you need to take a trip or do whatever else, you're deciding to do that.
That's exactly right. I mean, I work from home several days a week. I work in the office several days a week. I sort of go back and forth on where I'm the most productive. Some weeks I'm very productive at home, and then some weeks I'm less productive at home. So, okay, I'm going to go into the office more and get more done in the office. One of the nice things about technology nowadays is that it's not difficult to work remotely, especially in a business like ours, where so much that we do is over the phone or via email or written documents and things like that. It's really not hard to work from wherever you want, so long as you have an internet connection.
Yeah. So as far as usually I ask kind of like holistic questions, meaning like I try to probe into like different areas of an entrepreneur's life. So in terms of your family, you mentioned your wife a couple of times. What else is part of your family? Like you have just you and your wife currently?
Yeah, that's right. So we don't have kids. Kelly is from Eastern North Carolina, east of Raleigh. So she grew up in North Carolina, and when we met down in Florida, she knew that she wanted to move back up to North Carolina at some point, and I was obviously very open to it too, having spent 4 years in South Carolina and probably about 6 months living in Charlotte when I worked for the Speedway. I knew I liked this area of the country. The rest of my family is back in the UK still. My mom and dad still live in the UK. They're both retired right now. My sister lives in the UK as well. I'd say recently, a few years ago now, moved back from London to our hometown of Baldock. So she's 10 minutes down the street from my mom and dad at this point. Mm-hmm. So yeah, everyone there is still in the UK. We visit them a good bit. They visit us a good bit. COVID was tough for that because obviously international travel was limited for a while. Yeah. But my sister actually got married during COVID. She had to have a very small wedding the first time around because COVID restrictions were in full force. So, it was maybe 12 of us at that wedding. And then the year later, I say she had her second wedding, which is slightly unfair because it was to the same guy. But they went back to the church and had a blessing of the marriage from the vicar, and then had the big wedding reception that they missed out on. And my parents and sister and brother-in-law, they come over. They come over as much as they can as well. They like it out here.
Yeah. And as far as like your faith or spirituality, what's your view on that?
Yeah, so I would say I am somewhat spiritual, somewhat religious. I grew up in we were a church. Most people in England are Church of England. Church in the UK is nowhere near as big of a thing as it is over here.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't go to church on Sunday growing up or anything like that. And my wife and I still, we still don't go to church on Sundays now. But I would say I am still religious, and that I don't necessarily believe you need to go to a specific building to do that on a Sunday.
Yeah. And then as far as your health, do you have any kind of particular exercise or regimen or routines that you do to stay healthy?
Yeah, so probably not as much as I should. I play tennis. My wife and I played tennis a little bit as a child, but recently picked that back up. We live down outside of Monroe, so there's tennis courts in Monroe that we can go. And then I have hunting dogs. I have 3 pointers, and spend a lot of time on the weekends training them. So running around after dogs, climbing up and down off horses, keeps you in pretty good shape. I could definitely stand to lose a few pounds still, but it keeps me going.
Yeah. Any particular kind of diet or as far as food intake, anything that you've learned that's worthwhile?
We try and eat. So I cook a lot. I cook probably 90% of the time at home. I enjoy cooking. I'm quite a good cook, I like to think. My wife tells me at least. We try to buy local produce as much as we can. We grow a lot at our place, just in terms of vegetables and stuff like that. Not enough to sustain us for a whole year, but help supplement. We eat a lot of organic food as much as we can. My wife had a bout with thyroid cancer last year. She was diagnosed. Thankfully, early diagnosis, taken care of very quickly, all clear now. But that really got her attention in terms of, trying to eat just more holistically. We don't follow any special diets or funny diets or anything like that, but we try and eat, good home cooked food, organic where possible, and, local produce where possible as well.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to like purpose or passion for work or something in life, what's your view on that? And do you feel like you found your passion?
Yeah, I don't think you need to be passionate about the work you do necessarily. I don't think work should necessarily define you, I suppose. Mm-hmm. I am passionate about lots of things in life that are not work related. Dogs and horses are 2 of them. And I've found a way to sort of support those with my work, I suppose. So I enjoy what I do. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy being an attorney. I enjoy litigating cases. I've got a bit of a competitive streak in me, so I like to win, which litigation gives you the opportunity to win or lose. So I enjoy that aspect of it. But yeah, I think it sort of supports passions outside of work more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. And how do you build and maintain a meaningful life?
That's a difficult question. Man, I think you've got to, for me, pay attention to the things that are important to you. Sort of keep focused on those things. So for me, that's my wife. It's my hobbies. It's the animals that I spend time with and get to take care of and that sort of thing. To me, that's meaningful. Just keeping focused on what is meaningful to you and trying to ignore the stuff that's not, the extraneous stuff. I think that helps build a meaningful life. I don't know that, leaving a legacy or anything like that. Some people say I don't know that's too important to me. Just sort of taking care of the here and now is important and meaningful to me.
Yeah, they say there's different drivers, different things that motivate us. Like you mentioned, some people are motivated by leaving a legacy. Others are motivated by other things. And speaking of motivation, like what do you feel is motivating you? Like what keeps you going?
Clients don't stop calling me, which that's tough to ignore, unfortunately. I'm of course joking, but no. I mean, in terms of motivation, I would say, my wife and I, we like to travel a lot. Obviously, being from Europe, traveling back home to see family is not exactly cheap. But we like to travel. We like to spend time in Europe. I spent a lot of time in different countries in Europe growing up. We like to travel around the U.S. as well. I really like the western part of the country. I really like some of the prairie states up in sort of the northwest. So I think that's a big motivator for me to carry on doing what I'm doing in work. Is that, as cynical as it may sound, doing these things costs money, and you need to have money to do the things you enjoy doing. We're not making millions and millions of dollars. We're in the wrong industry if we wanted to do that, unfortunately. But we are building a life that we're both comfortable and happy with, and I think that's what motivates me really is building that life that I want and being able to do it the way Kelly and I want to do it.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you traveled quite a bit. What are some spots that you would say are the best, at least in your view, that you've visited?
So in terms of in Europe, I really like France. We actually last year we went to the Le Mans 24-hour race with my family. It had been on my dad and I's bucket list for a long time, and last year was the 100th anniversary of that race, so we went there. And then after that, we spent a week in the French countryside. My parents, my sister, brother-in-law, and Kelly and I rented an Airbnb out there and spent the week out there. And I really enjoy it. Rural France it's a very relaxed way. They always joke about the French that they really don't like to work that much. And it's a very slow pace of life in rural France. I speak passable French as well, I think, which helps. I really like Italy as well. Italy's great if you like to eat Italian food. Mm-hmm. Italy's a really good place to do that. Surprise, surprise. The food over there is excellent. I'm not a huge wino, but the wine there is good as well. I appreciate drinking it, even if I don't know what I'm drinking half the time. And in the US, I really liked the time I spent in eastern Montana. That's a nice part of the country. North Dakota's a nice part of the country as well. I enjoy it up there. There's not much there, which is perfect. I kind of like those rural areas without much hustle and bustle.
Yeah. Have you gone to Canada, to like Grand Prairie in Canada?
I have not. No. It's one of the places I would like to visit, but haven't made it quite that far north yet.
Yeah, I took a trip to Alaska one time, and like that area was really nice. Like the Grand Prairie area, just like on the one side of the mountains. It's pretty nice.
Yeah. Alaska's on the list as well. I would like to go up to Alaska and look around up there and all that sort of stuff. Last couple of times we went to Montana and North Dakota, I was taking the dogs with me, so we had to drive, which adds a little bit onto the trip.
Yeah. When you go to Alaska, I'm assuming summer would be the key time to go, because winter it's going to be all dark.
Yeah, for most of it. I think so. I've heard the mosquitoes in Alaska are pretty rough in the summer, depending on when you're there. So they joke that the state bird of Alaska is the mosquito. Yeah, I've heard that one before. I hate those things, but I mean, not enough to not make me go. But
I don't know, like, because I was there and I've seen a ton of them, but they don't seem to bite, or I don't remember getting bit. Like these tiny mosquitoes here in Florida, whatever, they bite and hurt more than the ones up there.
Oh, well, that's good to know at least.
So they're bigger. They're definitely bigger there, but I don't know about the biting part.
Well, I'll take it, I suppose.
Yeah. So, just kind of like some of the audience that I'm trying to talk to with this podcast is like young adults, people who are kind of transitioning from high school to college. And one thing I like to ask guests is like, what advice would you give somebody who is thinking of going to college or thinking of going into a career right out of high school? Like, what should they be thinking about for their next part of their life?
Yeah, I think retrospectively, make sure that college is the right decision for you. Um, if you're, it's a tough one, but I think my generation, and I'm 36. No, I'm not. I'm 38. Wow. My generation, sort of, it was really pushed into us growing up that you really need to go to college. You really need to get a college degree. Otherwise, you're going to end up at McDonald's flipping burgers
Right.
or whatever the case was. I think there are lots of good college alternatives out there now as well, especially with the cost of school seemingly going up and up every single year. In terms of what I do in construction law, the trades are hurting for people right now. Going and learning a skill, be it plumbing, HVAC, electrical, building or whatever the case may be, is I think a very good option that you don't need to go to college for, and you don't need to go into $100,000 worth of debt for. But I think college is a great experience too. It is what you make it. I think if you do go to school, you should make the most of it. I know plenty of people I went to college with who skipped more classes than they went to.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like a bit of a waste to me, given how much you're paying for it. But obviously, if you do go to college, then making sure you get good grades and come out seizing as many opportunities as you can while you're there, I think is very important. If you can come out of college with a job lined up, even better. Yeah, I think just think hard about what you want to do. I think a lot of people go to college because they don't know what they should do next. I don't necessarily know that that's the best thing to do. It's probably not going to stop people doing it, but I think having an idea. At the same time, when you're 17 or 18, it's really hard to have an idea of what you want to do for the rest of your life. You might not figure that out for another 4, 5, 6 longer years, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that either.
Yeah. What are some life lessons that had the most significant impact on you?
Oof. That's a tough one. I think, just in very general terms, sort of be a good person. Whatever that is to you, whether you're strongly religious and that influences what being a good person is, or your relationship with your parents influences what a good person is. Just be honest and try to live by sort of whatever your moral code is. I think another lesson that's somewhat cliched, but I think rings true and kind of ties into that as well, is that you very rarely have a second chance to make a first impression.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that in the legal community a lot in Charlotte. It's there are a lot of attorneys in Charlotte, but it's still a fairly small community in that most people know each other. And if you're working with someone that you don't know, and you call up a colleague and say, what can you tell me about so and so, and the first thing out their mouth is, "Oh man, you're really unlucky that you got to work with them on this case," or whatever. That's it's very easy to get a bad reputation. I think that first impression goes a long way to avoiding getting a bad reputation, and then just being a like I said, quote unquote good person. That's going to help. That's going to help a long way with not getting that bad reputation too.
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to stress, what are how do you handle stress? What are some things that you do to de-stress or handle stress better?
For me, I try and, for me personally, one of the biggest things that I have that helps me deal with stress is the dogs and horses and stuff like that. I can really block out a lot of other things out of my mind when I am training dogs or working with dogs. My sole focus at that point is what I'm doing with that dog. I'm not thinking about the 1,000 emails that I've gotten, or the 5 missed calls that I need to return, or the hearing coming up in court next week. So that really helps me de-stress, I guess, is removing myself from the stressful situation. That's definitely a big one for me. It sounds so obvious as well, and I'm really bad at doing this, even though I know it is a good way to take care of stress, but whatever it is that's stressing you out, deal with that issue. If it's a work thing and you've got something that you're stressing about at work, do the thing, and then it's not on your plate and it's no longer stressing you out. I'm really bad at following that advice, but 10 out of 10 times it works. So
yeah, don't procrastinate, basically, like attack the issue, and then there's nothing to stress about, because you have the outcome, whether it's good or bad. You have the outcome, so now you can't stress about it because it's already there.
That's exactly right. I tell myself that, and I know that to be true, and I still manage to procrastinate over things instead, which is not ideal, but hey, it's a learning process.
Yeah. How have your goals kind of changed over time, like life goals or whatever, your future dreams, let's say?
Yeah. I would say they haven't too much. I think, obviously they've changed since I was a 5-year-old or whatever the case may be. I probably wanted to be a dinosaur back then. But I think in terms of, since I've gotten married and, since my goals have morphed into, our goals, as it were, I think we've been pretty steady on what those goals are, in terms of, we want to build this law firm. We want to have a comfortable life. We want to be able to travel. We want to be able to, we wanted to live in a more rural area than Charlotte, which we are there now. We live out in Union County. So I think our goals have been fairly consistent. Keeping an eye on your goals is a good idea, because they do change from time to time. That's something Kelly and I do. I'm not a huge believer in sort of, what do people say, manifesting things. I think it and it will happen. I wish it was that easy, but at the same time, sort of, we have engaged in, drawing up vision boards and stuff like that, which I guess is somewhat manifesting, right? I mean, that's part of it.
It's kind of planning.
But I think planning is a good way to put it, as opposed to manifesting. But I think planning helps. Planning for your goals, planning for what you want, keeping your eye on them, and figuring out a way to move towards them. I think that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah. How do you stay up to date with whatever information you need for your business, for your life? Like, how do you stay up to date with learning new things?
So legally speaking, we're required to take continuing education. So that's how I stay up to date on that sort of stuff. We have to take, I think, 12, don't quote me, 12 hours of continuing education a year. But in my personal life, I read a lot. I read the news a lot. I pay attention to the news a lot. Various differing sources of it. I think that really covers it. And how I stay up to date on most things is, we just pay attention to things that are going on. Mm-hmm. Pay attention, read, learn. I think you can never stop learning, no matter what you're doing. So,
yeah. Looking back on your life, is there anything you kind of regret?
I often tell myself that if I had to go back and do it again, I would probably become a veterinarian or something like that. I really like animals, obviously. I think being a veterinarian would have been a fun career. I was never very good at science in school, so that would have been difficult. But at the same time, I think if I'd buckled down and looked at it, maybe that would have helped out. But no, I don't think there's anything I would have done differently. I mean, there are certainly things I could have done differently. I could have stayed in the UK instead of coming to the US. I could have gone to a different undergraduate school. I could have gone to a different law school. I think all of those things would have been would have resulted in me being in a completely different space to where I am now. But no, there's no decisions I really regret in terms of any of those big life decisions. I think, maybe I would have done them differently if I went back and had to do it over again. But yeah, just to see where things ended up a different way, I suppose.
Yeah. So getting back into kind of your industry of law, we hear about different kinds of lawyers. For those that may not be aware of like the vastness of the different lawyer types, can you give like a quick overview of what type of lawyers are there out there?
Yeah, I mean, there's lawyers for just about everything in life, really. People do specialize a lot when it comes to the law. You will find some law firms traditionally in smaller towns where they will do a little bit of everything. They'll handle your traffic ticket, they'll handle your divorce, they'll handle your will, they'll handle drafting contracts, they'll handle your dispute with your employer and all that sort of stuff. But all of those are distinct separate practices and distinct separate areas of the law. I would not be the person to represent you in a divorce. You would not do well in that situation. I would not be the person to represent you in a criminal charge. You would end up in jail, and you probably don't want that. I would not represent most people in a personal injury dispute because that's just not my focus, and I don't know enough about what's going on to be a really effective lawyer in that situation. Mm-hmm. Broadly speaking, very broadly speaking, I suppose there's sort of, you can break them down into two categories, is lawyers that go to court and lawyers that don't go to court. But then, I mean, from there, once you're in court, there's 20 different areas you could specialize in court. There's 20 different areas you could specialize in out of court. So you think it, there's probably a lawyer for it.
Okay. And what are some interesting stories that have happened? You don't have to name names or anything like that, but interesting things that you've dealt with in court or related to your practice.
So yeah, I mean, trial is probably where most of the most interesting stories come out of. As a litigator, someone who practices law in court a lot of the time, trial is sort of that's what you're aiming towards on every case you take. Now, I don't know the specific statistics, but 99% of cases never end up getting tried. They settle somewhere along the way or something like that. But we've definitely had some interesting cases in trial. Trial is always fun when you expect your client to say one thing and they don't else. Say it, or they say what you don't want them to say. And same with other witnesses. Other witnesses can bring things up. Obviously we can't name clients or anything like that, but we've had some fairly big name clients, I suppose, for the Charlotte area. They're always interesting to work with, and it's just very interesting seeing what goes on behind the scenes with some of your clients, whether it be in the construction industry, whether it be in other industries, whether it be in restaurant industries, or whatever the case is. You learn a lot of stuff that is protected by the attorney-client privilege, but things that you wouldn't know. Things that you wouldn't know if you didn't get to have those relationships with the clients.
Mm-hmm. What's kind of like one of the biggest misconceptions about lawyers or about attorneys?
I would say probably that we're dishonest. There's probably 1,000 attorney jokes out there about us being sharks or whatever. I've heard most of them, but if anyone has any others, I always like to learn a new one. But in my experience, I deal with other lawyers all the time. There are certainly attorneys out there who give the profession a really bad name. for a litany of different reasons. But by and large, we are bound by ethical standards from the North Carolina State Bar or whatever state you're barred in. And honesty and integrity are a key part of the profession. Like I said earlier, in terms of making a first impression or getting a reputation, it's very easy to get a bad reputation if you start messing around and doing things wrong and lying or being disingenuous. So I think that's probably a big misconception about attorneys, is that they're all dishonest and they'll say whatever they want to say. You do see it, especially in the, I guess, more in the media. You see it in the criminal side of things. Criminal attorneys get that reputation. But I think generally speaking, they're advocating for their clients the best they can, and there is a line in terms of the truth or a lie. There is a line that you're not supposed to cross, and most attorneys, I would say, don't cross it.
Mm-hmm. What are some other interesting stories that you can share? And again, not naming anything, but something from life or from work.
Yeah, so I guess when we were in Florida, you got to see a lot of different things down in Florida, I suppose, especially in South Florida when we were practicing law down there. One comes to mind. There was an attorney in town. I can't name names, but probably pretty Googleable at this point, who was running a very creative Ponzi scheme in Florida, using court judgments to make the money. I don't really understand the ins and outs of it necessarily, but he actually, when everything was closing in on him, he sent an email out to every attorney at his firm, asking his associates for a memo on countries that didn't have an extradition treaty with the U.S. because he wanted for a client, he said. But obviously I think he fled the country to Morocco. And then there were some unfavorable people tracking him down in Morocco, and I think he's in federal jail now. I think he returned to the US to avoid whatever was coming for him in Morocco, and figured that jail was a better place than perhaps not being alive, I suppose.
Yeah, interesting. I've heard things about that there's some people out there that instead of making money kind of the normal way, they make money by suing other people, finding out laws and some I don't know if you would call it gray area kind of a law or whatever, and then they're putting people in this place where now they owe money because they broke that law officially or something.
Yeah, that does come up quite a lot with various things. You can sort of have professional litigants. There was someone recently who sued, I think they sued Buffalo Wild Wings because Buffalo Wild Wings boneless wings aren't actually wing meat, so it's false advertising. It's breast meat or whatever it's from, but it's not wing meat. It's a boneless wing is not a thing, right?
Yeah.
And it came out that person has sued, I forget, but all sorts of different companies for similarly ridiculous things. That happened. That does happen. And sometimes they get away with it, unfortunately. You see it a lot with, sort of trademark as well, where people will trademark things that maybe they shouldn't and then start suing everyone. Or they'll, take over websites that they shouldn't have and sell them back for a profit. And then obviously you can see it as well in other various areas of the law. You do find some professional litigants. I know I was actually reading in the paper the other day that in New York State right now, they're having a big problem with sort of professional squatters. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to evict someone from a home. So people are finding these loopholes in the law and abusing them, for lack of a better term. I tend to think these issues end up getting resolved at some point, whether it be through the courts or whether it be through the state legislatures or federal legislatures, whatever the case may be. But it takes a long time. The law is slow to adapt, Up until very recently in North Carolina, people were still faxing stuff around for service of court documents. Fax was the fastest way to do it. You couldn't email people, and that wasn't accepted service per the rules of civil procedure. And obviously email's been around for God knows how long at this point. So the law is slow to adapt, and I think that does allow for things like that to happen sometimes. It's a shame that it does happen, but I tend to think they get worked out at some point. The loophole usually ends up getting closed at some point down the road.
Yeah, that's good. Speaking of wings, the other one that I just came to memory was Red Bull. I think they got sued because they were saying in the advertisement that you'll get wings. If you drink it, you get wings.
Yeah, I've heard that one before. Another one that always comes up, and I think some of this stuff as well is sort of a misconception in terms of it makes a really good headline. Mm-hmm. One that always comes up is the McDonald's hot coffee case, where that lady spilled coffee on her, and she got a huge award from the jury on that. And everyone says, "Oh, well, that's ridiculous. Of course, coffee's hot." Blah blah blah. But what's not mentioned, but came out in that case is that the coffee was X number of degrees hotter than it should have been, hot to the point that it melted her trousers and caused her to have skin grafts on her legs and stuff like that. So it's not just that the coffee was a little bit hot, it was that the coffee was hot as the surface of the sun and shouldn't have been, and the lid didn't stay on properly, and McDonald's they had some responsibility for that. But obviously that gets spun in the media as crazy juries giving away crazy awards. I find that most juries in my experience don't give, I wish they would have done sometimes, but they don't give crazy awards for things. No one wants to be sitting on a jury, I suppose. But when I am picking a jury in a case, generally speaking, I'm going to be looking for attentive people, the ones who look like they're paying attention. And I'm going to be looking for people who are, have a certain degree of education. I think that helps them pay attention. I think it helps them pick out the important facts from the bad facts. I think generally speaking, it's they make good decisions. Not a perfect system. Don't know that a perfect system exists, but it's the system we have, and I think it works for the most part.
Yeah. When it comes back to your business, in the beginning you mentioned what general services that you offer. If you can kind of delve into a little bit more details on what you were offering as far as your business.
Yeah, so we did just about anything. We at the beginning when we first started out, we handled a lot of residential landlord-tenant stuff for a while. So be that representing the landlord and in evicting someone, or defending against an eviction from the tenant side of things, depending on the facts of the case. We did a lot more simple wills. We handled a lot more litigation issues that we probably wouldn't handle nowadays. We looked at some employment things, which right now we don't do any employment law. But we pivoted fairly quickly to what we do now, which is sort of the estate planning, business, and construction side of things. We learned very, very, very quickly, and honestly, it shouldn't have been too much of a lesson for us, but it was. But you cannot be a master of everything, and jack of all trades, master of none, as they say. It behooves you to specialize quite quickly so that you can handle the more complex issues for your clients, as opposed to having to just handle, anything that walks in off the street. Plus, it makes our lives easier. When you see the same issues over and over again, you kind of know how to deal with them. And everything is different. Every set of facts is different. Every circumstance is different. So you have to apply the law to the facts in a different way every time. But when you're, I handle a lot of construction liens. It's fairly easy for me to do that at this point. Whereas, if you brought me a employment law situation, I'm sure I could figure it out at some point, but it would take me a lot longer to do it. And when we're charging by the hour for most things, it's that's not in my client's best interest if they're paying me to learn how to do something.
Right. So you mostly do construction related. So do you your clients are like business owners, or your clients are also homeowners?
A little bit of both. So both sides, depending on the situation. I represent a lot of general contractors, subs, engineers, architects, suppliers, but represent project owners too, whether it's on the residential or commercial side. So be it homeowners who have had a contractor do them wrong. I am seeing a lot recently where unlicensed contractors are performing work more than they should be doing. That's obviously been a little bit of an issue recently for quite a few of my clients. I don't know why I'm seeing it more right now, but I've had a few more of those cases come across my desk recently. And then a lot of construction liens where a contractor is not getting paid, whether it be final payment or a progress payment or whatever the case may be. North Carolina's lien laws are fairly robust there, so we do quite a bit of that as well.
Mm-hmm. And how can people reach you?
So best way is going to be email, edward@jessonrainslaw.com. Look us up online. I think if you type Jesson Rains into Google, we'll probably be the first one up there. We're located in Charlotte. We're in South Park on Fairview Road. A lot of stuff we do over the phone, and I met one of my clients in person for the first time last week, and we've represented them for 3 or 4 years at this point. So, a lot of stuff is done over the phone or via email now. You don't always need to meet in person, but at the same time, I like meeting people face to face and putting a face to the name. So, always willing to meet in the office too.
Yeah. And one more question for you. What does the world need more of today?
Man. More people involved in their communities on a day-to-day basis, I think. There's a lot of problems in the country and in the world, and there's a lot of discourse politically, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, no one can agree on everything. At the very heart of it, I think people have more agreements than they have disagreements. But you miss them because people aren't out there speaking to people and just doing day-to-day things anymore. So much of our life, especially since COVID, is conducted online and at home and all that sort of thing. So I think just more involved people. I think that's a very general answer, but I think it's a good one.
Yeah. Well, Edward, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Until next time. Thanks.